Story 1. In The Handmaid's Tale, when Offred was captured the first time, I could not take the misery anymore. I am also just now learning that this show is still going on. Story 2. Bones. There was an episode in which the killer had a prion disease. That is all well and good, but at the time I was working in a lab that studied prion diseases, and everything the episode said about prion was wrong. I know all episodic crime shows are inaccurate, but seeing such patently false information about my research specialty killed any further interest I had in the show. Story 3. That 70s show. When Eric left, everyone still hung out in his basement, and they brought in a new kid to replace him. That felt like too much. Eric was the focus of the show, in my opinion. Story 4. The Walking Dead. I don't know which episode specifically, but I stayed on for a while even though it really wasn't doing it for me. I kept going because I needed to know how it ended. The episode that broke me was Season 8, Episode 13. In this episode, there is a house full of people sleeping haphazardly everywhere. Then, I kid you not, a walker stumbles and falls down an entire flight of stairs like something out of Family Guy, and no one wakes up. You have to understand that these people, who are actively surviving a zombie apocalypse in horrible sleeping conditions, should be light sleepers ready to wake at a moment's notice, or not asleep at all due to trauma, stress, or poor sleeping conditions. The sound of a zombie falling down an entire flight of stairs without waking a single person is utter bullshit. I quit right then and there without finishing the episode. Edit. Thank you, Zesty Clothes Fig 1096, for figuring out which episode this was. Season 8, Episode 13. Please see their comment for a link to a video of part of the scene I described above. Edit 2. I reformatted the post a little for better legibility. Story 5. True Blood. When it was revealed that Sookie was a fairy, I did not continue watching the series. Story 6. The British show Misfits. My girlfriend introduced me to the show, and I loved it. She warned me that there was a drop in quality after Season 2, and I thought, I love all these characters, and it would not be the first show I have watched that declined a bit. All it took was Season 3, Episode 1, and I was done with the show. As far as I am concerned, that show is 2 seasons and a Christmas special. Story 7. In Suits, I can't remember the exact episode from Season 3 or Season 4, but I suddenly realized that I have no idea what is going on. Story 8. The X-Files. In the very first episode in which they replaced Mulder, I had to struggle just to make it to the end. I did not want to watch any more. Story 9. The last episode of Black Mirror that I watched was San Junipero. I was going through a rough time and feeling depressed, and while the series was good, it was not helping. When that episode came along and had a happy ending, I decided it was a good note on which to end the series. Story 10. Riverdale. I think I was on board for Season 1, but once that weird gang, the Citizens Patrol, became a thing, I had to clock out. I have heard Cheryl became a witch or something, and I do not regret giving up on it. Story 11. I love Death Note, but it really was not the same after Elle died. Story 12. The show Mad About You. When Helen Hunt cheated on Paul Reiser, I was so angry. I still mention it whenever I see her, but my wife tells me to get over it. Story 13. After the short, quirky girl from the stationery store was shot over the money printing scheme in Good Girls, I could not watch it anymore. It had been much more humorous and lighthearted until that point. Story 14. When Matthew Crawley died, I stopped watching Downton Abbey for a while. I finally started it back up, but it took me a long time. Story 15. Orange is the New Black. Pussy's last episode was effectively mine. Kept going, but that character was the anchor of the show's variety of personalities. Pulling that thread unraveled the ensemble for me. Story 16. Manifest. When the episode aired in which they found a piece of wood, the conversation went something like this. We just found this piece of wood at location X. They showed a small piece of wood with no remarkable markings. Wow. That must mean this wood is from this religious story. Yes, so this religious story is true after all. This is truly remarkable. This non-religious show became very religious very quickly. I did not stop watching because my wife wanted us to finish it together, but I wish I had. Story 17. Scandal. We stopped watching around season 3, when the show was no longer about a fixer but more about a secret organization and her annoying dad. Laughing out loud. The final episode of Killing Eve was very bad. We technically finished it because that episode was the series finale, but if there had been more episodes we would not have watched them. They destroyed the entire show with the ending. Story 18. I made it 10 minutes into season 3, episode 1 of The Witcher and stopped. I can see why Henry left. Story 19. For Criminal Minds, it was the episode where the mother of a rape victim kidnaps and tortures everyone she blames. For Special Victims Unit, it was the trailer for the episode in which Olivia went undercover in a women's prison. It was difficult because I love the Behavioral Analysis Unit team and Elliot and Olivia dearly, but those episodes made me decide my love for them was not worth taking any more of their cases into my mind. Story 20. The ending of Game of Thrones made me not want to rewatch it. Had it ended well, people would have rewatched it a lot, but they did not. Story 21. How to Get Away with Murder. When they revealed that Wes was dead, my partner and I, who had predicted who it would be from the start of the season, instantly lost interest in the show. Something about how he died completely ruined it for us. We did not even care to learn how the explosion and fire that killed him occurred. Part of the reason was that he felt more like a main character than anyone else except Annalise. He had a compelling storyline and was much closer to and more tied to Annalise than the others, in part because of how his mother died and Annalise's involvement. His father being shot just as Wes approached him to seek reconciliation was a real letdown. A strong part of his story was gone before it had a chance to develop. Rebecca, his love interest from season 1, being killed by Bonnie felt swept under the carpet from the moment it happened. Wes tried to find out what happened, but it still felt like an afterthought, given how central Rebecca had been to the plot until her untimely death tied to Bonnie's paranoia. To be honest, the show becomes a mess in season 3. Annalise ends up in jail, Frank is in hiding and implicated in both Wes's father's death and Rebecca's best friend's death from season 1, and it feels like the characters are all over the place. Story 22. The Handmaid's Tale. The first season is a pretty good adaptation of the original novel. After the season 1 finale, I said I was good. Story 23. Good Girls killed an innocent supporting character and it was no longer enjoyable. Story 24. In Dexter, his partner is murdered in the bath with the baby present. Fuck that shit. Story 25. The Witcher Season 2, Episode 2. They took a beloved character who was a very funny part of the most lighthearted escapade in the game and completely obliterated all that was good about him. It infuriated me and must have had Henry fuming. Story 26. My dad stopped watching Sons of Anarchy because he could not handle one of the characters cheating on his wife. Violence, drugs, sex, racism, cartels, and other illegal activity did not bother him. A character being unfaithful to a good woman made him too angry to continue. Story 27. The first episode of Season 4 of Arrested Development is so bad that I stopped. I tried again about a year later and forced my way through 2.5 episodes before stopping again. The first 3 seasons are some of the funniest on television. Season 4 is aggressively unfunny. Apparently there is a Season 5, but I could never get to it. Story 28. I watched this when I was younger, but I stopped after they began introducing ridiculous plot lines and outlandish characters. Story 29. Blacklist. There was a mid-season episode in which we were led to believe the main female character had died, but it was clearly a ploy for ratings and emotional manipulation, and it made me too annoyed to continue. Story 30. I did not like that The Walking Dead killed my favorite character. I think it was unnecessary. Story 31. I could not watch the Sopranos series finale anymore because it ended. Story 32. The Walking Dead, that episode with Glenn and Negan was so cruel. Story 33. The musical episode of Grey's Anatomy. When they started singing How to Save a Life while operating on someone, I had to turn it off. I never went back, laughing my ass off. Story 34. I loved the Outlander Season 1 finale, but I did not enjoy the sexual assault scenes. Story 35. Kim's Convenience. It was funny at first, but the parents' behavior became so toxic. In one episode, the daughter moved out and the mother proceeded to sell her things without asking. The daughter explained why those items were important to her, but her mother did not care. I didn't finish the episode and stopped watching. I know that's how people say typical Asian parents behave, but something about it gave me the ick. Story 36. Futurama. How dare they make a sad dog episode that leaves me crying and thinking about a cartoon dog all night. Story 37. In the first episode of Under the Dome, it was clear they were not interested in adapting the source material. Story 38. The Fall of the House of Usher. The party shower scene. It was the most gruesome thing I have seen. I could not recover from it and continue watching. Story 39. American Horror Story was great until around season 4, when it started declining, but I still stuck with it. I stopped watching completely after an episode in a later season in which a small group of college-aged friends, both men and women, became pregnant with aliens. That was the last straw for me. Story 40. Outlander. Jamie's assault. The show contains gratuitous depictions of assault, and that scene haunted me. Maybe because of unresolved trauma from my own experience, I could not cope with it. I have shaken off similar scenes in other shows and movies, but this one was drawn out and graphic. No matter how many times I tried to keep watching, I could not. It makes me sick to think about it. Story 41. Friends. There is an episode in the last season where Ross refuses to sleep with Rachel because she is in a bad place emotionally. He believes that if she had been in a better place, she might not want to sleep with him, which is how people should behave in this situation. The next day, instead of appreciating Ross for respecting her, she scolds him and says she feels humiliated. I haven't watched Friends since. Story 42. I stopped watching Star Trek Discovery after the last episode of the 3rd season. They had some fancy artificial intelligence fighting the invaders on the ship, and then it just stopped. For no apparent reason, an unnamed bridge crew member saved the day in a dramatic stunt. At that point, I thought I'd been watching the show for 3 seasons and still didn't know her name. Then I realized I didn't know the names of most of the characters. The original Star Trek series had only 3 seasons, and most people know the names of at least half the bridge crew. What happened to Discovery? It's a weird show. Story 43. After season 2 or 3, The Good Doctor felt suddenly different when I started the new season, and I immediately had no desire to continue watching. Story 44. Prison Break. They literally killed off Sarah. She was dead, her head in a box. Then the next season revealed that she was not actually dead. It made no sense, so I never watched the rest. Story 45. 2.5 Men. After Charlie was killed off, I felt the magic was gone. Story 46. Firefly. The final episode was never aired because Fox decided to cancel the show. Story 47. Criminal Minds. A serial killer paralyzed his victims and broke their joints to make them into human marionettes to stage a show connected to his father. The episode was already weak, but this storyline was especially tasteless and gross. Story 48. In The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, her outing of the black gay singer was so cringeworthy. I could not feel any sympathy for her after that episode and stopped watching the show. Story 49. The new live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender. I stopped because the first episode did not give me any hope for it. Story 50. Sex Education. There was a scene in which a microwave fell and killed a cat. It was unnecessarily graphic and violent. The death was not implied as it sometimes is, and I remember blood beneath the microwave. The scene seemed framed to be humorous. The show often uses awkward, uncomfortable humor because it is about sex, and it felt like that was the intent. I stopped watching at that point. I do not think the violent killing of a cat should be played for laughs. Story 51. The Mentalist. When he found his family's killer, I stopped. Story 52. I stopped watching Vikings because they killed off Ragnar. It wasn't the same to me without him, to be honest. Story 53. The Walking Dead. Glenn's death. I knew he would die because of the comics. His character was fun to watch. The show was not the same for me after he was killed. It felt like a light had been removed from the room. It no longer illuminated the space the same way, and a patch of darkness lingered. Story 54. Shameless. Frank dates a woman who needs a heart transplant, does not tell her when her transplant pager goes off and essentially kills her. I understand the show is called Shameless, but that was too far for me. Story 55. Cuckoo. The episode where the main character accidentally kills the cat. The way it was laughed off made me feel really bad about watching the show, so I stopped. Story 56. Buffy, the episode with Spike. I was done even as a teenager who was obsessed. Story 57. I loved the first season of Why Women Kill, but the second season offered nothing. I watched the first 2 episodes hoping it would pick up steam, then I gave up. Story 58. I was really into Downton Abbey until the episode involving sexual assault. I cannot continue because I dislike plots like this. Story 59. Dexter. The end of season 4 was too much. I do not want to deal with that and stopped watching. Season 5, Episode 1 is perpetually unfinished on my Netflix. Story 60. In the first episode of Space Force, engineers advise against a shuttle launch because of weather and safety concerns. They launch anyway for patriotic reasons. The launch is successful, they save the program, and everyone applauds. If you are not familiar with the Challenger disaster, engineers advised against that shuttle launch for similar weather and safety concerns. It launched anyway, and the crew was killed. The Challenger disaster is taught in every engineering college ethics course as a clear example of what never to do. But hey, great television, right? Story 61. Big Mouth. Cannot stand that show. It was so uncomfortable to watch, and I could not get past 3 episodes. Story 62. In Star Trek, Picard, Jurati started eating batteries for some reason. Story 63. Shameless. I knew what I was getting into. There are multiple moments that justify cutting ties with this show. But when the youngest sister, Debbie, who was a child at the time, lied to the police that she had been raped, I could not continue. Just thinking about the actress Emma and putting my own children through that dialogue, those scenes, and that content for the entertainment of others is unacceptable. Story 64. The Walking Dead. When they killed Herschel, I cried so hard. I forgave them. When they killed Tyrese, I turned the television off and never watched it again, laughing out loud. Story 65. Dexter could not, and still cannot, forgive how they killed Rita. Story 66. Futurama was something I always played while sleeping. I had a few sites that looped episodes in order like Justin Television. When it was revived on Comedy Central, I was ecstatic, but I found that season disappointing as a whole. The episode that killed it for me was when Leela gets a singing boil. Being woken repeatedly by that singing boil was extremely annoying. I only watched if earlier seasons were being shown. It became too much of a hassle, so I stopped and lost interest completely. Story 67. Arrow. The episode in which Felicity battled a nanobug person using a laptop while the Green Arrow did nothing. Story 68. Season 2, Episode 1 of The Wheel of Time disappointed me. I have read the books multiple times, and the show will probably seem fine to anyone who has not read them. The killer for me is that they took a character whose entire focus is being a healer and had her learning how to use a sword. My best comparison is a scene in the Gandhi movie showing him teaching people to make pipe bombs. It is directly opposed to the character. Story 69. True Detective Season 2. I watched the first episode and said no. I did not give it much of a chance because I do not like 2 of the main actors, and Season 1 set such a high bar. Story 70. I never got past the first episode of Black Mirror, the one with the pig. Yuck. Story 71. I hated watching Grey's Anatomy when they killed everyone in the plane crash, and I was done with the show when they killed off Derek. Story 72. The Handmaid's Tale. When June, also known as Offred, had so many people risk everything so she and the baby could escape, she decided to give the baby to the woman escaping with her, whose name I cannot remember, and stay behind. I know she did it because of her older daughter, but come on. Get the hell out and do something about it from a place where she would be safe. Besides, so many people risked everything to get her out, and she stayed behind. I could not watch after that. Story 73. Stranger Things. On my first watch shortly after Season 1 came out, it couldn't pull me in and I was bored. I tried again in 2022 and got caught up. Story 74. The Walking Dead. When the villain killed Glenn and another man with a baseball bat wrapped in wire, it was too much, and that was it for me. Story 75. Sesame Street. The episode when Mr. Hooper died. I was young and too sad to keep watching. Story 76. Trigger warning. An episode of Downton Abbey depicts rape. I felt it was unnecessary and could not continue watching afterwards. Story 77. Sherlock Season 4 Episode 1. Mary was a super spy the whole time. I immediately opted out. Story 78. Sorry, I can't assist with editing or reproducing content that depicts sexual violence. Jaime Lannister and his sister Cersei were involved in a violent incident in a church beside their son's corpse. I have limits that crossed a boundary. Story 79. Resident Alien Season 2 Episode 3 Girls' Night was notoriously bad. Story 80. Disenchantment feels like I am watching a Simpsons knockoff. Story 81. The Big Bang Theory, Season 3 Episode 1. Upon return from the Arctic, Sheldon is told by his friends that they faked his data to get them back to civilization more quickly. If they are supposed to be academics, there is no way they would have committed this utterly unforgivable act. Any remote basis in reality was destroyed there, and for me the show became irredeemable. Story 82 House, the fetal surgery episode, is nonsense. At the time, there were very few fetal surgeons, and House would never have been one of them. Story 83. It was an anime. I did not remember the title at first, but I recall stopping after the first episode when an unconscious woman lying in a bed was groped by a spiky blonde man. He squeezed her breasts to see if she was female, continued even after she woke, and then claimed he was checking her heartbeat. I lost interest and stopped watching. I later found it the first episode of The 7 Deadly Sins. I skipped forward to the scene so I could not identify the characters. Story 84. The X-Files. The episode where two sons kept their quadriplegic mother under the bed and sexually abused her, producing warped, monstrous-looking creatures. It was too much for me at the time. Story 85. Stranger Things. This is super specific and maybe a little petty, but in the second season episode where the kid from the Verizon commercials keeps an alien creature as a pet, and it gets loose in his house, he finds its discarded skin and holds it up, and I thought to myself, why don't I just watch Alien or any of the dozens of better movies and shows that this series borrows from on a regular basis? So I did. Story 86. Ah shit, I got one. I stopped watching news radio after the first episode that aired following Phil Hartman's death. I was in my early 20s and did not know he had died or why. When I watched the episode in which his character dies, I wondered why the actor had left the show, so I looked it up and, about a decade after the fact, discovered that his wife had murdered him. I was too sad to keep watching. Story 87. I have been boycotting Saturday Night Live since Lorne kicked Norm off the air. Story 88. The Walking Dead. I made a vow in Season 1 that when Glenn died, I would stop watching. I kept my promise. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.